Welcome back to the Into Boat Stuff YouTube channel. Today, we're talking switch panels. What I've got here in front of me is just a basic rocker switch panel and all that comes along with it. We have our power in, we got our power out, we got our ground, we got our switches, we got our breakers. And so today we're gonna go over all the different types of switches, all the different types of circuit protection. Here we've got breakers, the ways you can bring power in, the ways you can take power out, how to ground it, how to feed it to your devices, and all things in between. So let's get started. All right, so now we're on to different types of switches. We got our push button switches, we got toggle switches, we got rocker switches, and circuit breaker switches. Starting out with the push button switches, Bokatech switches, everybody knows they're one of the more popular brands. I think they work great, but they do have their shortcomings. Next, I've got a Blue Water switch. Here's another small Bokatech switch with the little spade terminals on it. And then these are just some Amazon cheapies. I personally recommend the Blue Water. That's just what I like. I'm not saying anything else doesn't work. A lot of people are gonna go with the Amazon brand, Chinese brand, eBay, whatever it is. If you're going to do that, I do suggest get one like this that has a pigtail on it. So that way, if you do need to replace it, it's much easier to replace. And also, getting the correct spade terminals to fit on here is pretty difficult. Typically, you need a specialty tool to crimp those, and just makes life difficult. Here's another one made by Bokatech. It's got tiny little pins on it. Now, you can crimp down on a regular spade connector and make it work. I really don't advise that. If you don't want to start fires, if you want your switches to work when you turn them on, then it's best to use things how they're meant to be used. So you want to use them like this, get the proper pins. They're available on Amazon, eBay, all that stuff. But personally, if you're going to go that route, get one with a harness on it. And be careful too with some of these switches. They're only rated for about 5 amps. So for your lights, great idea. You want to run a bilge pump or a washdown pump off this, it's not going to work. It's simply not going to work. Those things run 10, 15, 20 amps. And then back to Bokatech switches, great switch. They do make resettable switches, and almost any manufacturer that makes these push button switches does make a resettable switch. So it's a 5 amp switch or it's a 10 amp switch. So if it goes over current, it shuts the switch off, protects it. So the cool thing in that is with installation, is it makes it much easier to actually install it in the boat because you don't need some sort of external circuit protection. It's built into it. However, if you build a switch panel and you have accessory switches, switches that you're not using for anything currently, but you want to add something down the road, you don't know what amperage load that might be if you don't know what you're adding to your boat. Also, they're extremely expensive these days. They're near $100. This is a Bokatech switch, just a regular Bokatech switch. Same thing. Back to the Blue Water switch is what I really like about them. And these all, quote unquote, through bolt. You stick it into the dash, you tighten the nut down, and there you go. These Blue Waters have a pigtail, and they have the switch themselves. So if a switch does fail, I mean, as long as you can get to the back of your switch panel, you can replace it in literally minutes. Where again, another drawback of the Bokatechs, if you have a switch like this and it fails, and someone's installed it very pretty, with a bunch of zip ties to make everything look nice, it might take you an hour just to replace one switch. Where you could keep one of these on your boat if you wanted to. And Blue Water are much more affordable than the Bokatechs. So we'll put that down. And then same thing with the Amazon brand stuff too. Same thing, if you need 10 switches, buy 12, buy 15. Keep a couple in your boat, keep them in a Ziploc bag, spray some WD-40 on them, keep them protected from the elements. Another consideration with push button switches, never ever mount them like this in the boat. They should never be vertical. If at all, try to mount them completely horizontal. The problem being is that when it rains or when you wash your boat, water gets down inside this switch, and as you press it, eventually you're going to wear out the little diaphragm in there. You're going to get water in there, and the switch is going to fail. It's just going to happen. So if your switch panel makes your switches mounted flat, up and down, vertical, however you want to talk about it, then don't use a push button switch, or find a different place to put your switches, because you're going to have failures. I don't care. You buy the cream of the crop Bokatech, you buy these ones, you buy the Amazon ones, you're gonna have failures. And if you're a weekend boater like most people are, you want your boat to work every time you take it out. You don't want to have to be sitting at the boat ramp trying to figure out what's going wrong when you just worked your ass off all week and now you're having to work on your boat. You bought your boat to enjoy it. Don't screw it up with cheap parts and poor installation. Next, I mean, the most basic switch of all is a toggle switch. As far as mounting these, it's kind of similar to the push button switches. You got a stem and a nut, and you can install it just like this. You just tighten the nut down on the switch panel, boom, you're off to the races. They actually do come, if you can see here, there's 2 different nuts. So if you have a thinner panel, you can actually screw the bottom nut up so not so much of the switch is sticking through the dash. Or my favorite option, put a boot on it, especially if you're fishing or you're boating in saltwater. I think this is necessary because it seals the switch, or gives it the best chance to be sealed. And I mean, that's pretty much it for those. They're pretty simple, super cheap, super affordable. I would say be careful where you buy them from. Again, just like anything, you can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on eBay, but you're gonna likely get a lower quality part. Most all of the marine manufacturers, it's going to be a Carling brand switch. It might be sold under a different name like Blue Sea, but it is manufactured by Carling. Carling's been doing this for a long time. So if you can figure out whatever you're buying, if it's who's actually manufacturing the switch, it's gonna help you out significantly. Next is circuit breaker switches. Typically, you're gonna see these on bigger boats, and it's going to be in a breaker panel. It's not necessarily to turn the device on and off. Seacraft used to do this. I've seen them on Makos before too. They're a super robust switch, and it gives you circuit protection and a switch all in one. They are kind of pricey. I think I just picked this up for like 23 bucks at Boat Owners Warehouse. So it's not terrible. If you go buy in West Marine, of course you can pay West Marine prices. They're kind of difficult to install. You almost kind of need someone to custom cut a panel for you. If you're trying to do it at home, there's 2 mounting screws and then the hole where the switch actually goes through the back. They can be kind of difficult to make look pretty. If you try to do it by hand, I've done it a couple times and it's just difficult to get them all lined up straight. So a good option, but it does have its difficulties. And then most any boat you're gonna see is gonna be rocker switches. I mean, I would say it's probably the most common type of switch. They're tried, they're true, they're reasonably affordable. Same thing as the rest of them. You can buy the ones at the marine supply store, you can buy them off Amazon, and you know, it's just, what it boils down to is how often you're gonna replace them, how reliable they are. I personally I'm not someone who wants to spend money just to spend money, but I'm willing to spend the extra money on the quality parts because I know they're gonna typically last as long. Or even still, when you buy something off Amazon and it fails a year later or 6 months later, you don't have much recourse for them to actually help you out. A lot of times they're gonna tell you to kick rocks. If I buy a product from a quality manufacturer and it fails in 3 months, 6 months, I feel confident calling that company and saying, hey man, I spent the extra money on your part as opposed to buying it from someone else, and it failed. And I don't think it should have failed this soon. And you have good recourse for them to send you some new stuff at their cost or at a discounted cost, whatever it may be. So that's switches in a nutshell. Now we're gonna do a little bit of a deeper dive on switches. So if you can see these rocker switches, they all have different terminals on them. So you have 4 basic types. I'm probably forgetting one, but I'll find out in the comments. So you have single position, single throw. So you have 1 inlet, 1 outlet. The switch goes one way. This is off, that's on. That's all it does. You give it power here, it puts out power there when you turn on, and this is a ground here so that when you switch it on, it lights up. And then you've got, well, let's go to this, sorry. Single position, single pole, dual throw. So 1 inlet, 2 outlets. So for example, this is a good option for, say, a bilge pump is a popular thing. Or maybe you have 2 different live well pumps and they're both the same size, so you want to run them off one switch because you don't have room on the dash panel. You can use this. Now obviously you can't run both at the same time, so depending on your application, you need to consider that. But you push it up and it energizes the lower one. You push it down and energizes the upper one. And same thing as before, this is your ground terminal. Then we've got dual pole, dual throw. So you have 2 inlets and 4 outlets. Now technically, you could operate 2 completely separate circuits on this. But typically what this switch is used for in a boat is your nav and anchor lights. So you would bring power into the center and you jump it over, and then say if you want the bottom to be your anchor lights, cool. If If you want the top to be your nav, cool. It doesn't matter which way they go. It just matters which way you want to hit the switch and have both of them come on. So that's a use for that. And then I don't have any dual pole single throw. There's not very many applications for it, but it does exist. And on this one, you can see there is a whole bunch of pins there. So you've got 2 inlets, 4 outlets, 2 grounds, and 2 inlets for LEDs. So this one is a momentary switch, so this is for trim tabs. And it lights up, so you push up, it lights up, you push down, it lights up, and then also, if you have it hooked into the rest of your rocker switches, you can have it when you turn on a specific switch, typically your nav and anchor lights, the whole panel lights up, which is a really cool feature if you go boating at night. If you've spent any time on a boat, I'm sure you've been on a boat where you gotta sit there and turn a flashlight on to figure out what switch to turn on. It's super frustrating. If everything's lit up and you can see it, that's awesome. Also, it looks really cool. I haven't met a boater yet that doesn't like things that don't look cool. A couple more little things. You can get a very basic cover. It's just a cover, it's black, it's whatever. Or you can have a printed label like this that you can get online for, they're usually around $10, where a plain cover might be like $6. And then you can get laser etched like this one, which is a little bit higher in price, looks a little better. This is a Contura 3 and this is a Contura 4, I believe. And if you want to replace them, the way I do it is I literally just pop it off. Technically, that's not the correct way. I don't think I've ever broken a switch doing that, but they do make this wonderful tool that I probably don't know how to use. There you go, it pops it off. So if you want to pull it off, cool. If you want to use the tool, cool. The tool is like $5 or something, so if you're nervous, buy the tool. I'm sure they're on Amazon. Again, I've never bought one, so I don't know where to get them. I got this at BOW this morning for this video. I don't use them. But if it makes you feel better, cool. Going to the toggle switches. Same deal where you've got single pole or dual pole, meaning single inlet or dual inlet, and then how many outlets you have. So everything we just went over the rocker switches, same thing with the toggle switches. They're all gonna do the same thing. And also, I didn't go over before too, you can have latching switches where this is a momentary switch. So you push and hold and it gives power. You let go, it releases power. Same thing in that direction. So that would be like trim tabs. Or you just have a regular on-off. It latches on, it latches off, that's all it does. So same deal with the rocker switches. It's the same stuff, just a different way to do it. And even on the push button switches, they do have all the same aspects as far as inlets and outlets. Typically though, they're only gonna have one inlet, although Blue Water is coming up with new switches that do have multiple inlets and multiple outlets. But typically like a navigation and anchor switch, you're gonna have, like this is a nav anchor switch here. So we've got 5 wires here. We've got a red, which is our power in. We've got a blue, which is our LED light. So we can hook it into this switch, and when we push the button, it lights it up. Or again, we can hook this to all the other switches so that when the nav and anchor light switch comes on, that everything lights up. You've got a black wire that's ground, and then you've got gray and brown. So one is your nav, one is your anchor. So you push the button once, it energizes both of these. When you push it again, just one is energized. So when you're on your boat and you're underway, your nav light is supposed to be on, your red and green light, and then your all around white light. Different on every boat, we don't need to go on that conversation right now, but when you're underway and you're moving, both those lights need to be on. All 3 of those lights want to be on if you want to be technical and you've got your red and green mounted in different locations. They all need to be on. When you're anchored up, hence why people call the all around white light an anchor light, just that light needs to be on. So if another boat sees you, they know that you're not moving and they know that they need to avoid you instead of thinking that you're going to avoid them. Not really much to go over on the breaker switches. They're typically an in and out sort of deal. Sometimes on big boats, you'll see a dual pole switch for alternating current. But what we're going over here is a DC switch panel, mostly centered around center console boats. Maybe at a later date we can go into further depth with this, but for right now, I think that about covers it. Now we're on to circuit protection, actually protecting the switches and the devices that we're powering, so that if your bilge pump fails, if your undergunnel lights fail, your underwater lights fail, and there's a short circuit or whatever, that something is going to pop, blow, release, whatever term you want to use, before bad things start happening. So right now, let's just go over, we've got inline fuses. These are just two different types. An ATC or ATO fuse goes in there. We'll go over those later. And these are just two different types of the same thing. I would never typically use these on a switch panel, but a lot of like the Amazon switch panels you'll see, they have just a bunch of inline fuses to protect them. Super common way of protecting everything is you put a switch in each individual thing here, and this also has, these are the grounds and these are the hots. You're gonna run power from the fuse panel to the switch. So again, if you have issues, the fuse is gonna blow and you replace it. You can also mount breakers in there, just like these. These are inline resettable breakers. And the cool thing with these is there's nothing to replace. If you pop the breaker and there's nothing wrong, like just it was some oddity thing, maybe a battery was too low, maybe you had something stuck in your bilge pump and it caused the fuse to blow or the breaker to pop, you just simply push in on the little white piece there, boom, you're reset. Don't see these very often anymore, but I figured it was worth sharing. This kind of mounts in the same type of hole these breakers do, but you put a glass fuse inside of there. So you got power in, power out. And again, they're not very common. I don't really like them. They just don't seem to last very long. And I think they're just kind of outdated in my personal opinion, but worth showing so people know they exist. Then here, we've got what I call breaker blocks. These again are made by Blue Sea. So these breakers, your settable breakers, it would typically go in the switch panel, go in here so that everything is mounted down below. The advantage of these, I think it's a nice clean look. It's easier to label them. It's easier to diagnose, and it keeps, like you can put these rubber boots on these breakers, but you know, they can wear out. The sun can get to them. This puts it under your console where likely it shouldn't ever get wet. And the cool thing with these too is you bring power in here and then each individual device comes out there, but also you've got a ground block here. So now it eliminates one more piece of equipment that you need in your boat. All your devices, your bilge pump, your underwater lights, your trim tabs, your whatever you've got, you can put the grounds on here. And same thing, this is a 12 position, this is a 6 position. So same deal, super awesome product. You are gonna spend a little bit more money using them, but I think in the end, I think it's a great product and I use them very often. I find that they're a great product. I think they look great, I think they look clean. And sometimes maybe you don't have room for something like this. Although if you look at these two, it's obvious which one is larger, but there are different shapes. So maybe this will fit where this one won't fit, or maybe this will fit where this one won't fit. You just never know. And that about sums up the basics of that. Okay, further on the circuit protection, but a more in-depth look at fuses, breakers, whatever it may be. These are two resettable breakers that I would typically use. Same product, just different look. These ones are way more expensive. I typically don't use these, but sometimes it's better for certain applications because the in and the out are on the same side. So when you're trying to make things look nice, maybe that's better for you. I do think these are much more robust, but I typically don't have much problem with these either. I use these on near every boat I work on. Again, as everything, you can get the Amazon type. You know, it's up to you. I've never used them. I do this as a business. I need to ensure that things are gonna last long, so I'm not wasting money warranting out cheap parts. I'll spend the extra money and have a product that I know works well. So on, off, on, when it pops, it's gonna fling up. Cool thing about these compared to say fuses, if you need to work on your boat and say like you want your stereo to work, but you still wanna diagnose your bilge pump, if they're on separate circuits, you can just shut this off and you know that you're not gonna get shocked, you know you're not gonna arc anything, weird stuff like that. But you've gotta have something feeding your switch panel. So again, if we have one of these fuse panels, you're gonna come off your battery switch to the breaker and then to here, So if for some reason there was something wrong with this fuse panel, or there's something wrong with your entire switch panel, something happens, something shorts out, this is going to blow rather than a bunch of wires melting and your boat potentially catching on fire. Also, technically, legally speaking, you have to have this. There's a bunch of rules about that. We're not going to go over that today. For people doing it at home, I know you're not going to follow those rules anyways. The Coast Guard isn't going to subject you to them, so we'll leave that for a later date. So those are resettable breakers. And a couple different types of fuses. This is an A&L fuse. I've seen people use this to protect their, switch panels and fuse panels for electronic stuff like that. But typically this is for like a bow thruster, windlass, large loads like 150, 200, 250, 300 amps, where it spikes up really high. This isn't going to blow, and also it's protected by this little, I don't know if it's plastic or glass, but if it blows, it's not setting stuff on fire. This is a maxi fuse. So again, just like these, you can get an inline fuse holder that'll hold this giant fuse. They make them from like, I think 30 amps all the way up to like 150 or something like that. I could be totally wrong. Maybe it's 80, maybe it's 70, but it's an option. I don't particularly like it because in many small center consoles, where these don't seal that well. So where you mount this is likely going to get wet. It's going to corrode in a saltwater environment. I just don't find it to be the best thing, but it is an option. And again, I'm sure there's very cheap options of it on Amazon. Now here you have an ATC fuse. Now this looks exactly the same as the fuse that you have in your car, or perhaps maybe you have an ATM, which looks the same, but it's a little bit smaller. And there is one model that is further smaller, but in boats, this is typically what you're going to see. Now, why is it ATC and not ATO? Aren't they the same thing? They look exactly the same. Yes, but no. They both work. You can cross-reference them. ATC will work here, ATO will work there. They'll both work back and forth. The difference is ATC is a closed fuse. On the bottom of there, that is closed up so that when this blows, if say it's in an engine room or somewhere there's gas vapors, you're not creating a spark that's going to blow your boat up. Also, the real advantage for most people, because hopefully you're not leaking gas anywhere. I mean, maybe that's an inboard issue because you got engines inside the engine room, blah blah blah. No one cares about them. I'm just kidding. But it's sealed. So also, if you're again in the saltwater environment, it keeps the saltwater out of your fuse. So they last longer. I've seen so many fuses fail because people go and buy them on Amazon. They buy them, or AutoZone, Amazon, O'Reilly's, Napa, whatever. You're going to get ATO fuses. Now, I'm sure you can go on Amazon and get ATC. And I'm sure they're still vastly cheaper. But also, I mean, how expensive can a fuse be? Maybe $1 a piece. How many fuses do you have in your boat? 10? So you got to buy a 25 pack because that's what it comes? Okay, $25 so that you know your things are going to work. I think it's worth it. So I very highly suggest you get the ATC. Yes, they are more expensive, but it's going to make things last longer, prevent things from corroding, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, again, a little outdated, but we have glass fuses. So you've got a metal contact on each side, and then you got a little metal filament in the middle, kind of like an old school light bulb. Some stuff still comes with this, like a lot of VHFs still come with these. They totally work. I think, again, saltwater environment, they have some corrosion issues, but they absolutely work. I still keep them with me all the time because I see them in boats. I just don't ever install anything that contains a glass fuse. And there are different sizes, so if you're going to replace a glass fuse in your boat that's failed, take it to wherever you are with you or just measure the length of it. I honestly don't know of like a quote-unquote size that these are. I have seen different sizes in boats, but mostly they are the size that's in my hand, which doesn't tell you anything, but glass fuses exist, so just be aware of them. And it's an option if you want to save a little money perhaps, because it is pretty old technology. Okay, now we're on to the ground side of things and the outlet side of your switches. Now, you can certainly take, I'm just going to show you a rocker switch. You can put power in here, whether it's coming from a breaker, coming from a fuse block. coming from wherever you're getting power from. It goes into the center pin there. It comes out here. You can hook your bilge pump directly to there. You can connect the wire to your bilge pump on the positive side and run it directly to the switch. I don't suggest you do that, but that is the easiest way to do it. Another way to do it is, get out of here, is terminal strips. So these are just a couple different options. This is called a Euro block or Euro terminal strip, or rather than having to put a connector in here, you just put the wire inside there. You are supposed to use ferrules, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, so that it gets the best grip possible and you're not just splitting the wires apart when you put it in there. There are times where I do have to use these, hence why I have them. I'm not particularly a fan of them. They're made out of plastic. I mean, I could probably break this thing in half if I wanted to. So I don't use them, but they're an option, and they are stupid cheap. And so there's different amperage ratings. So I believe this is like a 20 amp terminal block, maybe 15. And then I believe these are good up to 30. So each individual leg can handle 30 amps. And for a center console boater, that's going to cover everything you need. They do make a block that I believe is good up to 50 or 60 amps. So higher loads where you want to connect things, that's a great option. So that's terminal strips. And this is just simply, you're going to run power out of your switch to this, and then your device is going to go to here. It makes things much more serviceable. That way, if you ever need to pull your entire switch panel out for some reason, say you want to paint your console, you need to fill some holes, whatever you want to do, you can just unscrew everything on one side and pull the whole thing out. And then next, we have, and so that's the outlet side. These are going to be on the grounding side, but also on the feed side. So if I've got breakers on my switch panel, like these are physically mounted on the switch panel, you have inlet, outlet, you can jump from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and daisy chain it. And to this day, you can go to many boat builders, and that's how they do it. I refuse to do it that way. I think it's terrible, but it works. I've been in boats for 20 years old that are done that way, and everything still works. It's not that it doesn't work, but it's just not proper. And the problem is, if I've got 20 of these and one wire fails, now everything down the line doesn't work. So what I do, and get this thing off, is bring one large power wire in here that again is going to be serviced from a breaker or an inline fuse or something of that nature. Big power wire coming in here, 8 gauge, 6 gauge, 2 gauge, whatever it is. And then individual wires coming off of this to my breakers. That way I know everything has its own power source. You're going to use more wire, you're going to use more connectors. It's going to cost more money, but in the long run, I think you're going to be happy about it. So that's one use of this bus bar. This is the same thing, just larger, more terminals. I also use them for grounds. So when you're running all your wires from your devices in your bilge in the front of the boat, wherever it is, into the console, well, your bilge pumps, your lights, everything, it needs a ground, or else it's not going to work. So this is a place to bring all your grounds. Now again, to go into the rules a little bit, you are not allowed more than 3 connections per terminal. And whenever possible, avoid shoving 2, 3, 4, 5 wires into one connector. Yes, you can do it. Does it work? Yes. Again, I've seen it, 10 years old, and it still works. But it's not the proper way. So that's that. All right, so now into the intricacies of the switch itself. As we talked about before, when I was showing you all the different switches, between rocker switches and toggle switches, they're very well the same as far as how they work. Here in the center pin is always going to be your power in. Below and above that are in line with that are going to be your power out. So think of switches in the opposite direction as far as you turn them on. If I flip the switch up, that's going to give power to this lower terminal. If I flip the switch down, it's going to give power to the upper terminal. And that's the same with a rocker switch as it is with a toggle switch. But in essence, you have a power in and a power out. On this one specifically, you have 2 power outs. If you have a push button switch, you still have a power in and you still have a power out. And most all switches, at least any switch that has a light in it, is going to have a ground terminal or a ground wire. And that's simply to give ground to the little LEDs inside of the switch. So there's toggle switches that have lights in them. Obviously rocker switches. There's, pretty much every push button switch has a light in it. So that's what that ground is for. It's worth noting that when you do it, such as here, we've got them jumped together, that in my mind is perfectly fine. If you wanted to run individual wires, you could. I just don't find the lights on your switch panel to be absolutely necessary to the function of the switch. Surely it's nice to know that when your switch is on, but you can also just physically look at the fact that you turn the switch on. And it's something that's easy to repair down the road. So that's why I typically just jump them together. If you have a really big switch panel that's got 20 switches on it, you might want to split up 10 and 10, because if you're using like an 18 gauge wire, as you go that far with the ground and all your switches are on or all the lights are on, you are going to get an amperage load that becomes a whole number. These individual little LEDs maybe draw a tenth of an amp or a third of an amp, but if you have 20 of them on, maybe it draws 5 or 6 amps, and that individual 18, 16 gauge wire might not be enough. So either you're going to run into a problem of you're burning things up, or you're going to have LEDs that get dimmer as you go down the switch panel. So keep that in mind. With a lot of push button switches, they have their own wire. So I'll typically group them together in 3 or 4 at a time, put a butt connector on there, and then run the wire to a bus bar. So you have different groups of switches. They're all gonna work the way they're supposed to, but you're giving yourself a little bit more circuit protection, so to speak. Also worth noting, this bus bar here is the positive bus bar. You should have some type of cover over top of this, because typically you're going to end up, not always, and this is based on your installation, but you might have your ground bus bar and your positive bus bar near each other. Now, if you know anything about electricity, if you're building your own switch panel, you should know enough that if something metal touches both of these at the same time, you get a lot of pretty colors. And not pretty colors like 4th of July, pretty colors like fire. So it's good, you should have a cover over the positive, or you could put a cover over the negative as well, because as this is done here, obviously the ground is very close to the output positive, so you can put a cover on that. You could cover both of them. It's whatever you choose to do. Again, there's rules of what to do, but if you're doing something in your garage, there's no one that's going to come and tell you what you can and can't do. But you should always do your best to protect yourself, your family, and your passengers that are aboard your boat from unneeded accidents. All right, so we've seen a bunch of the back side of the switch panel. Now let's look at the front side of the switch panel. So as we spoke about before, you can simply just put the nut that comes with the breaker on it. You can put a clear boot, you can put a black boot. I always prefer the black boots. It matches the switch panel if you're using acrylic, which most people are these days. It also is better protected from the sun. The clear ones will yellow over time, or they'll crack, and now it's not sealed anymore. The whole point of this is to seal it. So if you do have an overcurrent situation, what's going to happen is the breaker is going to pop out like this one is. And to reset it, you simply push it back in, and it's going to sit flush. Now, if you go to push it back in and it doesn't go down, either whatever situation is going on that's causing it to pop is still occurring, or not enough time has passed. It's a thermal breaker. So it takes some time for it to be able to be reset. But if you wait 30 seconds and you go to push it down and it's still not working, it might be a breaker issue. It might be that whatever issue is going on is still occurring and you need to look elsewhere. Some other little things about the breakers. On this side, most all of them, on one side or another, most any breaker you buy is going to show you the rating, the amperage rating. And on the other side, it's going to show you line, and it's going to show you load. Line is your power in, load is your power out. That matters. If you hook this up backwards and something shorts out, it's not gonna pop the breaker, it's going to melt wires. The reason they put that on there is because it matters. So pay attention to that, look out for that. It doesn't matter which direction the breaker is facing. If you wanna flip the breakers around the other way and have the power come out here and go to the switch, that's fine, it doesn't matter. This is just the way that I did it, but where the wire actually goes does matter. Pay attention to that. Moving on to the switches. Again, just to show you, you can simply lift off the switch cover and change it out. And when it comes to removing the switch, sometimes you can simply just push them out, but there's actually little tabs on there that you push these down as so, both at the same time to push the switch out. So you can take your thumb and push down on it and push one side of the switch out and then come in on the other side, and usually you can just press it out and it's gonna come out. And that about wraps it up. All right, that sums up switch panels. I'm certainly somewhere along the way there's something I missed, or there's something you want more detail on, different video you wanna see, leave it all in the comments. What I'm trying to do here is take what I've learned working in the industry and give it to the people who are working on the stuff themselves. That's where I started out. Me and my dad rebuilt a boat in our driveway when I was in high school. I wired a boat for the first time when I was probably 16 or 17. Although admittedly, if I were to go back and look at it now, but everyone starts somewhere. And I certainly didn't have YouTube videos to go watch, so I'm just trying to give that to people so they can do things themselves, get more people on the water, get more people enjoying their boat, and doing it all safely. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.